You can change your thoughts, but you can't outwork your thought habits. And you've got to stop and sort of understand what's happening below the surface if you want the more influence, more impact, more income without more work.
Introducing The Vixen Voice, a podcast for ambitious women entrepreneurs ready to move into their feminine essence, live their truth, and unlock their full potential. I'm your host, April Roberts, and each week I'll be interviewing inspiring women who decided to take a leap of faith to pursue their dream. Women who believe that they were born for something bigger. Hey there, just popping in quickly. It's April Roberts, and I wanted to thank you for being a loyal listener of The Vixen Voice. It means so much to me. And because of that, we're going to be popping in these little announcements because I want you to be the first to know what's going on at the Vixen Gathering. So if you haven't done so yet, click the link below and check out the Vixen Founders Collective. The members who are already in are raving, and we would love to have you join us in the ultimate business consulting, networking, and personal growth community for Gen X female founders. See you there. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Vixen Voice. My guest today, Amy Kemp, and I will be talking about all things mindset, habits, and we're going to be talking about how money is a mirror. So I just want to dangle that carrot because you definitely should tune in, because even women I meet with an abundant mentality, we all have our stuff about money, right? Let's get real. So Amy is the owner and CEO of Amy Kemp Incorporated. She helps leaders and business professionals understand how deeply thought habits impact every part of their work and life. So she's a certified habit finder coach, a published author. We're going to dig into all this stuff. I have so many questions for her, so stick around. Amy, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, April.
Yes, I'm excited to dig into this. So I'm super curious about things. Before we get started, Amy, I purposely keep your bio very short because I always believe that you tell your story better than I do. So I'd love to ask, I have the honor of interviewing hundreds of women a year, and it's just amazing to see how beautifully different they are and multifaceted. So we all have different journeys, but there are also a lot of similarities. I'd love to ask you, what's a pivotal story in your life that was really pivotal and helped carve the woman we're chatting with today?
This is a great question. I'll actually tell this story that is the opening to my book because I do think that it is one that so many women can relate to, but also just paints a picture of a real turning point in my professional and personal journey. So my husband and I were meeting with our financial advisor. I, at that time, had built a business in sales. I was leading a sales team. It was over 1,000 people across the United States. And from all exterior vantage points, you would have said, oh, she's got it all together, at the top of the mountain type of a situation. And we met with our financial advisor. It was one of those days where you remember what you were wearing. You remember the sound of the air conditioner in the office. And I had spent a couple of hours filling out forms for her, just, the normal, what are your long-term goals? Here are all of your assets. This is, where we were, kind of a picture of our financial life at that time. And so our financial advisor is awesome, and I trust her so much. So we're sitting in her office, burgundy burlap chairs. I remember so many things about this moment. And she has the forms in front of her on the desk in a neat little pile. And she says, so I've reviewed all of your notes. Everything is so organized. You're doing a really great job managing your money. And there's not debt outside of your home. You're doing a great job with what you have. There's only one problem if you want to achieve the goals that you have set for yourself, paying for college for 3 kids, retirement goals, things that I had put in this form. And she leaned in and she kind of put her arms on top of those forms and she said, you're not making enough money. And I don't know anything else that was said for the rest of the meeting because my brain was instantly just swirling. One, because I think she said something that I knew to be true, but to hear it out loud, and then immediately I kept thinking, who can solve this problem? And I'm looking around this room, it's just my husband and I. And he is in education and should be. The only way he makes more money is by getting older. And so I knew immediately there's no one else that's going to take this on. And I had to make a choice. Do I change the goals? Which that's what she was saying is we can change the goals. It's not that you're in dire straits, but a decision needs to be made. I had no idea what I was going to do differently, but I knew two things. I couldn't work any more hours. Our kids were, I call it like the Uber stage of parenting where no one was driving and everyone was in things. I couldn't work any more hours. I was already working full time. I couldn't work harder to solve the problem, which would have been my go-to, right? There was just no capacity for that. I also knew I was going to figure it out. I had no idea how. I had no how, but I knew I was committed to reaching those goals. And so what that led to over the next course of a couple of years was probably some of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make, some of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have, and then the birth of a new business sort of by accident, just in a random conversation that I had. That's a whole nother story. But that one moment of truth, clarity, it was a life-changing moment.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to, again, because it's so funny. Just yesterday, I did a post on my Facebook group talking about how it breaks my heart that women feel torn between ambition and showing up for their families, themselves, and the world. And that in the world we live in today, there are so many options, right? But I think it starts with like you made a decision. Okay, I'm going to figure this out. I don't even know if you knew there were options when you made that decision. That's what I'm curious about.
That's interesting. I knew I had to change. It wasn't that I had to do something. And again, the way I had built what I had built up to that point was sort of just by working really hard, being very competent. I think I had a level of skill, of course, but really my MO was if I need more, I work more or I work harder or you kind of put your nose to the grindstone and just hustle. And I had gotten to the point where I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. It's just not going to. I describe it sort of like when you're riding a bike and it's like you're in I never know if it's a low or a high gear. I think it's low where you're going really fast. The pedals are going really fast with very little resistance. It was like that's what I was doing. And I knew that that wasn't making me go further. I knew I had to downshift and like have fewer revolutions. But I think I believed that I could travel farther. Now, I'm also making it sound very neat and tidy. There was a lot of feeling, a lot of shame, a lot of just feeling confusion, a lot of just feeling like, well, what in the world? Did I do something wrong? Did I not? There was a lot I needed to work through internally as well.
Yeah, but I love it because when you said I knew I couldn't work harder, there was no more capacity. And I think, a lot of women I first talked to coach or that I'm chatting with through different things, they feel the same way, right? Like I'm going to have to sacrifice something because this means working harder, or this means more time. And that's not necessarily the case. And that's why I love the work you do because you reframe a lot of these beliefs, right? Or show them how to reset their habits.
You know what is like to me one of the biggest tragedies too is women take themselves out of the running for the higher position, for the promotion, because they believe that the way you get it is by working harder. Even in a small business or a large business, most of the time when I'm working with people, it's the core message of my book. You can't outwork your thought habits. You have to learn to think differently to go to that next level. It's not about working 18 hours a day at all. In fact, for most of them, it's about working less and showing up differently in those same spaces that allows them to earn more and to increase revenue or increase sales.
Yeah, and it's about leverage. It's so funny because because I have built a multiple seven-figure business and sold it. And so in that process, your thought habits change, right? Because you can't keep going to the next level. And I used to joke, I was like, this is why people like me need executive assistants. Because it's like if you have to call and deal with things in the normal world, like we think so much differently than the average bear out there, it's like a very frustrating conversation, right? Like you almost need a buffer. So, I mean, and I'm talking about everyday things. I'm a huge fan of leveraging your time. So, if you can write a check and someone can help you with this, great. Of course, if it makes sense in the big picture. So, I'd love to dig in. You talked about thought patterns, and I know one chapter of your book is called Money as a Mirror. And first of all, can you give us the full title of your book? And if you're listening, it's going to be in the show notes. And if you've subscribed to the Vixen Voice, it will be delivered to your inbox. So don't sweat it. You can totally get your hands on the book title.
So the book title is I See You, and it is a guide for women to make more, have more, and be more without more work. That is the subtitle of the book. So, yeah, I'm really passionate about this topic of money as a mirror. I think that money has a lot of really great information for us if we will pay attention to it and our responses to it and just our relationship with it. Are we giving money the power to make us feel safe and secure? Or do we just see money as something that is available in abundant quantities, that is constantly moving, flowing, shifting? I'll paint a picture. This is in the book also, because as a new entrepreneur 20 years ago, I would have described my relationship with money like this. I was in the ocean in the middle of some huge waves because money moves, right? Money goes up and down always since the beginning of time. It's a currency that moves and it never stops moving, and it shouldn't, frankly, right? The biggest problem in our experience with it is when it gets stuck or we cling to it or we stop its movement. But what I would do is I would be out there in those waves. If things were going well and sales were high, I was like so confident, really excited, happy, peaceful. And then when things took a dip, which they always do, there's yet to be a business that hasn't experienced ups or downs that I know of, right? Eventually, everything, my self-confidence, fear, even just, I would describe it as like terror. I was just petrified when things weren't good. And so what I had to learn to do was basically swim to the shore, go to the store and buy one of those little beach umbrellas and chairs, and just take up camp on the beach. From the beach, you notice two things or a few things. There's not a shortage. Plenty of money, plenty of water, right? On the beach, and you're looking at the ocean, there's no shortage. Two, it's supposed to move. It's supposed to go in, it's supposed to go out, it's supposed to go up, it's supposed to go down. Now, sometimes we do have a storm. I mean, there was a global pandemic. Like, there are legitimate times where too much comes in or too much goes out, or it can be damaging. But even that from the beach, you can adjust better than you can if you're in the water. And then I think I also just recognized my safety and security when it's detached from the movement of that money. I tend to attract money in vastly larger quantities than when I'm attached to it for that feeling. When I don't give my power away to it, then it moves toward me. Money moves toward feelings of confidence, safety, peace, openness, joy. It's attracted to those energies, and it will move toward you when you separate money from those feelings. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I always say money is just a form of energy, which is exactly what you're saying in different words. And that's just how I say it. And when you start thinking about it that way, it demystifies it. Okay, this is an exchange of energy. So I love it.
As an entrepreneur, I always want to be empathetic to this too, though. The hardest time to live this out is when you really do feel like you need it. You know, I can just hear someone listening saying, well, right, but I also have a mortgage or rent, or I have these kids that need things. And so, yeah, it's easy to say those words. I think that's where kind of the separation occurs the most where it's a daily walk where you're really learning, yep, it's moving and I'm trusting that it's going to come. There's this just a real walk of faith you have to take in those moments.
Yes. And the other thing is, cash flow is the most stressful part of being a business owner. And the major difference, because, I work with a lot of clients who were successful in their careers, like pharmaceutical sales or corporate America, like oil and gas attorneys. And then it's like, okay, you've had these extremely difficult jobs where you have been the best of the best. And then you become an entrepreneur. Like one of my clients the other day goes, I was a great leader in corporate America, and now I'm struggling to lead my team. I said, because you're worried about cash flow. And she said, you're right. And I said, okay, we have to fix this. The same things that made you a great leader there, we have to tweak them a little in entrepreneurship, but you have the skill set. We just have to fix this mindset and this worry about cash flow, which is exactly what you're talking about. So yes, it sounds easy, but if you can make the perception switch and then have accountability or do the work like you're talking about to start walking that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And if you want to know every unhealthy habit of thinking you have in your subconscious mind, go ahead and move from being an employee to an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Because it's like all of them were held down underwater like they're beach balls. And then you move into that space and they just whoosh to the surface. I've seen it take people out. I mean, like the most competent, capable people, because it's that real. So if you experience that, I always just want to normalize it and say, yeah, you get to meet a lot of things that were buried under the surface that you didn't have to deal with when you knew there was a paycheck coming in. It wasn't dependent on just you.
Yeah, personal growth and up leveling is so key to surviving as an entrepreneur. And that's why I love the work you do. So let's dig in, Amy. If we do have someone listening and they're like, okay, I hear you, I get it. Yes, I need to get out of scarcity. Like, how do I do this? Like, you're big on helping them become aware of their thought habits. And then I'm assuming you help them also like replace them or exchange them, right? So, what does that process look like, or what are the first steps?
Yeah, well, first, let's just talk about what a thought habit is, because it's not a common term that we hear or use. So, our brains have about 20% of the thoughts that are happening at a conscious level where we're aware of them. But most of what's going on is at the subconscious level. Things that create breathing. And I mean, we don't want to have those things be conscious where we have to remember them, but they're impacting us. We're just unaware of them for the most part. So the tool I use called the Habit Finder takes a snapshot of your brain's, if you can imagine, sort of like grooves in your brain, or I think of it like the slides on Chutes and Ladders where, you land on that spot, you're going to slide down that slide. We have these grooves largely because we're hardwired to survive. And when you use a survival mechanism, so for example, working really hard, being perfect, staying out of the limelight and not drawing attention to yourself. Okay, let's say those are your survival mechanisms, even as a child, that you learn, and those grooves are deep in your brain. When you move past the point of needing them to survive, and you continue to employ them, they become detrimental and will actually hold you back from your fullest potential. It sort of can suffocate you. I tell this story in my book. This client of mine grew up with a mom who was an addict. She had to parent basically for her siblings, and she did all of the Christmas presents, she paid the bills, she made sure everybody had lunches. She was running the household at a pretty young age. She did it really well, but she also had to override the intuitive voice inside of her that said, I shouldn't have to do this, I shouldn't have to do this, I shouldn't have to do this. And so her hard work was what allowed her to survive. Well, fast forward 25 years, she's building a business and she's working 85 hours a week because her mechanism is work hard, be perfect, do everything for everyone, right? At that point, when she no longer needs it, it's actually damaging to her. And so our work together was a lot about, one, acknowledging why that's there, because it's real. Like there's nothing wrong with it. You needed it. You used it. You did a really great job, actually, all things considered. But two, can you see with awareness that this is now actually going to make you sick if you continue? That this is unsustainable for your body, your spirit, your marriage, your life. Your business isn't even growing anymore because you're capped out. And so our work together was just a lot about what are the habits of thinking that are happening. We're using this tool. What are the habits we want to replace them with? It's so slow, but it really is lasting work. It's not just like changing what time you get up in the morning or what you're eating or things that are on the exterior.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of times these thought habits that are like really survival based habits are kind of linked to success in our society. So you have to overcome,
They
right?
absolutely slay in corporate America. I mean,
Yes.
yes, because perfectionism, people pleasing, overworking. Although I will say, you move up to a certain point
Yes.
and then you just become the one who's doing all the work.
Yeah. But because societally that's held, it reinforces what you have inside of you. Because I know one toxic, I like to call it, thought habit I had after my divorce because my ex-husband had an addiction. And I was like, I failed at marriage, which is the most important thing. Like growing up, I thought I can't fail at anything else. So my clients got the best freaking retirement plans ever because I'm like, they're not failing. Like I built my business crazy because I wasn't going to fail, but I was pushing because I had this I can't fail mentality, right? And then when I spiritually started growing and I exited that business, I was like, I have to fix this. Like, I can't operate this way the rest of my life, that I can't fail. But at the time, it was my survival mechanism to like overcome all of the trauma I had gone through, right?
So, how did you unhinge that? Like, was it just a process of awareness, choosing a different thought?
A number of things. So I'm a trained spiritual healer for God. And so I've been getting healings since April of 2020 monthly. So other people can think about working like with a coach like you or working with a therapist. So it really helped me tap back into my intuition and what came natural to me versus what I had constructed through belief systems, experiences, etc. So I like to say entrepreneurial journey is the fastest way to self-growth, but like spiritual is just above it.
Well, don't you think it's kind of the same thing?
Yes, it is.
You know, this makes me think in my book, one of the lines actually in the chapter where I tell the story about that client is that you can't turn off your access to your intuition in one area of your life and then have it in all of the others. So if you've had to turn it off to survive, like my client did, where she was saying, this doesn't feel right, but I'm going to do it anyway. This doesn't feel right, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? Over and over and over again. Then you don't have access to your intuition about, am I tired and done for the day?
Yes.
Right? Have I eaten enough? Or am I hungry? Or do I trust this person? There's so much of that intuitive guidance system that we rely on when you're growing a business that makes it sustainable over the long run. But if you've shut it off in order to survive, you're making every decision with your brain. And when your brain gets tired, we don't make the best decisions.
Right. Well, and also your ego and your brain pops in to protect you, but to protect you in weird ways, right? Like these old survival habits that we're talking about. And so you can out logic yourself. No, it's really interesting is what I've been working with a number of my clients in right now is sleeping more because they are so sleep deprived. And I'm like, okay, you really need like 7 to 9 hours a night, but like you're sleeping 4. Can we get you to 6? Like it's literally like begging. I just had a client. She's like, I had a huge win. I slept 6 hours a night this week. I haven't done that since I was 16. She's 48. That's insane. Like,
and your body will get sick, right? This is in chapter 10. I can't believe you're saying all the things.
I think our work is very similar.
So structures like sleep, structures like how much do I work, structures like what am I feeding my body for energy. When I think of structure, I think of like these processes or systems that we embrace or that we neglect to embrace. What's true about structure is that if you neglect it for long enough, it will impose itself upon you. Now, I can't believe she survived that long, but I'm saying typically, if you don't sleep enough, your body will get sick and it will enforce sleep upon you, right? In the worst case scenario, you'll end up in the hospital, and that is the highest form of structure. So it's like we don't embrace structure because we think it will inhibit our freedom. Structure is actually the path to freedom. It's what gives us freedom. Same thing with money. It's like if you don't choose to embrace structure with your finances over a long enough period of time, in the worst case scenario, you could end up on welfare, which is a structure imposed upon you, right? Where you are then being told how much money you're given each month by the government. Again, there are other reasons that people end up on welfare. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying that we a lot of times, particularly as entrepreneurs, become them because we long for freedom. And so then we're our own boss imposing structure on ourselves, and we're resisting it the same way.
Yeah. It's so funny. I just did a goals reflection for the quarter with one of my groups yesterday because we always try to pivot before the end of the quarter so you hit your goals. And this is exactly what we're talking about, like exactly this conversation here. But I always say structure creates freedom, and I was very resistant to it. But I had a business coach come in my first business, and she was like, "What are you doing? You're going in 10,000 directions every day. Let's do this on Monday. Let's do this on Tuesday. Do this on Wednesday, Thursday." And I'm like you said, you resist, but when I did it and committed to it, like things took off and I felt so free and I felt like all the tabs were closed and I had mental clarity. So I know what I was talking about with the goal setting. When you impose the structure on yourself, like I have my clients, I'm like, look, if there's a number in your goal, awesome, but I don't care. I want to know what done looks like. It needs to be defined because otherwise you start negotiating with yourself, right? That's not what I meant. I really meant this. Like you need clarity. So even in goal setting, you need the structure.
Also, if you want to go deeper, like into the more healing space in areas of like health, finances, relationships, habits, the things that we set New Year's resolutions on, basically, just all of the whole batch, right? When you are constantly resisting structure in an area, so for example, we'll just play around with like someone who's resisting the structure of sleep. If you, instead of being critical of yourself and beating yourself up about that, no, I think of a person on a beach with like a metal detector. And if you're kind of scanning, and you come to the place where you're resisting structure, if you dig down there, right there where it's beeping, you're going to find unhealed pain, and trying to discipline yourself or power through or push through to embrace that structure is futile until you deal with that unhealed pain. So perhaps it is when I was growing up, it wasn't okay for me to just sit and read a book. There was someone always saying, what are you doing? You need to be productive. You need to be doing something. Or maybe it was, I had a season where money was really tight and I had to work all the time. And I'm afraid if I stop, I won't have money. There's like a reason that you're resisting resting. Or perhaps there's a relationship where you're having to do an unfair share of the unpaid labor in your relationships. And so there isn't time for you to sleep, or you're giving too much to your work. And so you aren't able to get everything where you're able to sleep. Like there's so many things that it can be. But what I'm suggesting isn't that you just say, I'm going to set a timer so I go to bed at this time, because you won't until you deal with the reason why you're not sleeping. Right? You've got to get down to the root of it if you really want sustainable long-term change.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love this. I'm giggling because I wrote down chutes and ladders when you're talking about it because my niece and nephews are young. And so I always have games for us to play. And I'm like, oh, I got to get that one. Like, think about it. It's such an important life lesson that things don't always go as you plan, right? Suddenly you're at the bottom of the board and you have to get back up there.
That's really true.
Yeah, so we'll be playing that this weekend. Thanks for the tip. I'll
I
be
love it.
searching for it. No, I love this so much. So what I'm curious about, Amy, is I know you're a certified habit finder coach. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the tool that I use measures your habits of thinking in 6 areas. So, for example, it measures it in the area of your connection with people. So, what are the subconscious habits of thinking that come up when you are interacting with people, deciding whether you trust someone, meeting someone for the first time, addressing conflict with people? One of the habits of thinking in there leans toward non-confrontational a lot of times, which means that your subconscious brain is saying either this is going to be a World War III size battle if you address it, or you are powerless and just leave it alone. Don't say anything. And your brain is giving this like all or nothing scenario. And so you're not addressing poor performance. You're not addressing inappropriate behavior or treatment. You aren't having clear conversations with people, but you aren't even aware of why underneath the surface. And that's really impactful. So each of the 6 areas, there's a curriculum that corresponds with it that we work through, but that's kind of an example. Another one that I see a lot with entrepreneurs, we have the capability to vividly imagine things.
Yes.
I mean, so clearly. So this is a funny story about this with me. I have so many personal examples to share about this because my brain is fast and vivid, right? It goes worst case, best case, where, it will swing. So when I published my book last year, I don't know if everyone knows this, but when you publish a book, you can't see how many books you've sold in pre-orders until the day it publishes. So pre-orders are coming in, but you don't have access to the dashboard, which as a business person, I was just like, oh my gosh, how.
Drives you nuts. No, podcasting is crazy. It's like that too. It's so not transparent, right? Like we're top 3%. I'm like, I don't even know how to get to top 1%. Like it's a goal, but like there are no transparent numbers. It's crazy.
I need data, right? I love
Yes.
data. So I, in my head, based on Amazon rankings and just seeing people buy it, had this number of books I thought had sold.
Right.
And I had imagined it so vividly. And I didn't even realize I had done it. It wasn't conscious. My brain just goes there, right? And I was feeling so good about myself. So the day comes, I get on this call with the publishing company, and she's walking through this dashboard and she says, here's how many books you've sold. And it's about a third of the number I had. Now, mind you, I have no idea where I got the number that I had in my head. Like I have no experience. I'm not a publisher. I mean, I crashed. I'm a failure. This was a bad idea. No one's ever going to buy the book. Why did I do this? You just do this horrible thing. So I walk out into the kitchen. My 18-year-old son is out there. And he says, hey, Mom, did you ever find out like how many books you've sold? Because we had been talking about the fact that I couldn't see it, and they knew it was coming out. And I said, yeah, I just found out. I got to tell you, I'm so disappointed. It's just not nearly what I thought it was going to be. And he turned his head and he kind of looked at me, like cocked his head a little bit. And he said, well, isn't it like the second day?
I love it.
And it was like instantly, I was like, oh, there's my habit of thinking. It goes from fantasy, this number I created, to catastrophe. I'm a failure, right? And then here's this 18-year-old being like, well, why don't you just take the next step today, Mom? Why don't you just, instead of spiraling and feeling like a failure and not showing up for your next phone call with confidence or doing the next marketing effort with confidence, why don't you just focus on the day, on the millimeter steps that are actually going to create what you're imagining, instead of swinging back and forth in these imaginary worlds that don't even exist?
I love it. And I know this is a little off topic, but you're talking about numbers, and we live in a world of unreal numbers. And I think that entrepreneurs have these swings often because of that. I was laughing because I'm rewatching like Law and Order SVU. Like I'll watch one show a night to wind down. And it's like 2017, I think, the episodes I'm on. And they were talking about this vlogger who was so excited that she had 1,000 views. Like, how many entrepreneurs feel like they have to have 100,000 views or 1,000,000 views today, right? Like, that's how quickly the numbers have shifted. And then I was talking to someone in the know, and they were showing me how, like, major accounts like Beyonce, she was like, go look at the followers. But, like, most of them are fake, right? Like, so that's why I love your point. You have to be grounded in reality and what is success for you, because we live in this world driven by insane numbers right now. And a lot of times our expectations do not match up to reality.
And in the attention economy, that doesn't always translate into profitability.
Yes, exactly.
And so there's also that, right? It also doesn't always translate into service of the people you are here to serve on this world. So when I think about my book, my writing coach always says, you don't write books about things, you write them for people. Are you writing your book in service of your reader? Are you doing the work you do in service of your clients? Are you creating that marketing material in service of yourself or in service of the person that you're trying to reach? In my work with clients, we use the phrase, if there is anyone I can serve, put them on my path today and I will serve them. So again, I want an exchange of money for that service that is fair and beneficial for both of us. But also, I am here for that person. There is a temptation to get lost in those numbers or to misinterpret them and then wind up feeling less than.
Yeah, it's so funny because similar to your coach, I always say, like, how can I bring value here, right? Like, if it's one-on-one, if I'm on a stage, if I'm on the Vixen Voice, like, how are we bringing value? And that is the number one question. So I love it. Oh my gosh, Amy, this is fascinating. Unfortunately, I believe in honoring your time, so I know we have to wrap it up soon. I know you have your Habit Finder assessment. Could you share with our listeners about that? I'm sure they're curious to go check it out.
Sure, it's free, which is super cool. When you take it, you can go to amykemp.com. So just my name, AMYKEMP. It says take free Habit Finder assessment. You get your results right away. It's a 44-page printout, or there's like a kind of, you can play with the graphs and move around and toggle around if you're on a computer. And it is a snapshot of not your strengths and weaknesses, not your gifts or what you're doing well or not doing well. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts are just happening, right? This is not in the bucket of a lot of assessment tools that are really valuable. It's just different. This is just a picture of what your thoughts are doing right now. And the really cool part about thoughts is that you can always choose a different one. You can change your thoughts, but you can't outwork your thought habits. You cannot overcome these by just working harder. And you've got to stop and sort of understand what's happening below the surface if you want the more influence, more impact, more income without more work.
No, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what an amazing tool. So again, if you're listening, go to amykemp.com. And friendly reminder, if you haven't subscribed, go to vixengathering.com/podcast. If you subscribe, we deliver all these amazing resources to your inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. So would love to see you on that list so you don't miss out from our amazing guest. Amy, thank you so much for our conversation today. I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about you. This came up in my mind as you were talking. I work a lot with my clients on their feminine and masculine energy and like swinging between the two. And so, it's important to have a balance. And a lot of these things you're talking about play into that because we're working against our intuition, which is really especially our superpower as women. I always like to ask, when do you feel that you've stepped into your feminine power or essence, like you're really flowing in your feminine energy?
When I have a group of people and I'm able to facilitate a conversation that is mutually beneficial for everyone involved, I love that. It's not me coming in as the expert or the source of knowledge or the leader who has a vision and we're going to charge forward. Though I do often feel like there is a place where you're communicating vision. It is a creative, collaborative, relational exchange where everyone's unique genius gets to shine and I'm facilitating it. That's my favorite.
That's beautiful. I love it. And what color is your feminine energy?
Oh, it's so funny. It is baby blue, which is really funny and ironic, but I think that's what I look like in color.
I love it. So, as we wrap up, any parting words of wisdom or message for everyone out there listening?
The thing that I would say that I know you would echo is never apologize for investing a percentage of your time and money in growing you. I've chosen to not have guilt be part of my life, right? If I'm going to make a decision, I will make it intentionally, and I am choosing to just leave guilt behind. But I hear a lot of women feeling guilty about investing in coaching or a course or a group or a whatever. I just want to say enough. You are worth it. Invest in you. The thing that you want to grow will grow. Or it will go away and something else will show up, right? When you invest in you. But don't apologize for it. And don't ever feel guilty about making that a priority.
Yeah, I love it. And to your point, it's your time, your energy, and your money, right? There are many ways you can invest in yourself, and these are all important assets.
Yeah, many years my mentors were books. I mean, there were so many years where those were my people. The authors were my people through the pages because that was what was accessible to me financially. I mean, especially now we have access to so many great resources. But are you like really plugging in is the question.
Yeah, and you need that accountability element too. So if you're able to hold yourself accountable, then that's great. But if you're not, just be honest about it and get some accountability, either through a group, a mentor, or a coach.
People always say, you're the most disciplined person I know. And I always say back, no, I am the most accountable person you know. I have paid for accountability for the last 25 years. I've invested more in coaching, personal and professional development than anyone I know. And that level of accountability is what creates what you're seeing as like discipline. It's totally different, but it's absolutely the truth.
I'm the same, and I've always done it in my professional career. And last year I was like, I'm doing this in my personal life too. And I hired 2 personal coaches for different areas of my life. And it's like life changing. It's like, this is amazing. I love it. So thank you for sharing that, Amy. And thanks for being an amazing guest and an amazing person. So keep bringing your value to the world. I love it. For everyone listening out there, you know that I always say the world needs more love. This week, I'm going to echo what Amy said. How can you love yourself more? Where have you been wanting to invest in yourself, but you've been hesitating? Go ahead and say yes and do it. I promise it will pay back in spades, as she shared with you. So have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources we mentioned, visit vixengathering.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of The Vixen Voice.